Yeah, one was deciding, I think having a plan for what you want it to look like is helpful. I remember when there's just a few of us in the beginning, and I had done this org chart, and it was like what I wanted the organization to look like in the future, and I knew that future wasn't today, but it was like maybe 5 years away. What was fascinating is I had accidentally ran across that document some years later, and I was really surprised at how close we ended up moving into that direction because I had taken that time, I probably took a Friday afternoon off and just kind of said, hey, what do I want this thing to look like in the future? And that was a big piece of the puzzle. But what it ended up doing for me is it helped eliminate decisions because I knew how I wanted to create the teams. I knew how I wanted to start, uh, what departments I wanted to create and things like that. And a lot of those things are still intact today, which is pretty cool.
Welcome to Scale Like a CEO, where we dive into the journeys of successful business leaders. Today, we're exploring the story of building and scaling an IT services company. We'll be talking with Keith Schoolcraft, who's grown his business from a small team to a thriving enterprise over 2 decades.
Keith, thank you so much for joining me on Scale Like a CEO. Just to get us started, I would love to hear a little intro about yourself and your business.
Yeah, my name's Keith Schoolcraft, and I'm the CEO of a couple of gurus. We have been around for over 20 years, based out of the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and just have had a long-term passion for technology and serving customers. And ever since I first started, I wanted to grow the business, and so we've done that slowly over the years, and methodically.
And in within the industry that you serve, what's one of the biggest challenges that you're solving currently?
Yeah, a lot of so we serve a specific marketplace, which is the SMB Marketplace, and they still have the same challenges larger organizations. So if you look in the manufacturing sector, for example, you've got large manufacturing that will have internal IT departments, whatnot, and then you have small mid-sized manufacturing that may or may not have anybody in that space. And in today's world of CMMC regulations and other cybersecurity things that they'd have to adhere to, it's really hard to find folks that can do that kind of work as well. So the CMMC space is one. The med device space is another. Those are a couple of spaces we specialize in that are kind of unique that not everybody does.
Excellent, excellent. And so you said you've been running the business for 20 years. I'd love to hear a little bit of the journey of, I'm guessing you started out as a one guy or
Yep.
two, well, you're two gurus, right?
Yep.
So you're bigger than that
Yep.
now, I believe,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about the journey of how you grew the team.
Yeah, one was deciding, I think having a plan for what you want it to look like is helpful. I remember when there's just a few of us in the beginning, and I had done this org chart, and it was like what I wanted the organization to look like in the future, and I knew that future wasn't today, but it was like maybe 5 years away. What was fascinating is I had accidentally ran across that document some years later, and I was really surprised at how close we ended up moving into that direction because I had taken that time, I probably took a Friday afternoon off and just kind of said, hey, what do I want this thing to look like in the future? And that was a big piece of the puzzle. But what it ended up doing for me is it helped eliminate decisions because I knew how I wanted to create the teams. I knew how I wanted to start, uh, what departments I wanted to create and things like that. And a lot of those things are still intact today, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great. I love, it happens like that, right? You sometimes set out on a vision, and even if you don't have that thing in front of you, it was still all in here
Right.
anyway. And so you've got that you're carrying with you. And so, you know, what were some of the decision points that got you to say, yes, I can add this person to the team? And, I think that's one thing that founders often struggle with is knowing like, when do I hire? Is it the right time?
In the beginning, it's pain, right? In the beginning, it's you're really operating by gut and by pain, right? You're like, oh my gosh, our workload is so high, we're having a hard time staying up. We need to hire someone else to help with this. As we've gotten along, we've gotten a lot more methodical about it, and you start measuring things, right? So you start putting together some KPIs, some key metrics, number of workstations to engineers, for example, is one metric, right? The amount of tickets created per endpoint, different things like that, that actually help you decide how many engineers you need. So, and now when you bring on clients, you can say, okay, this client is this size, or we've brought on X number of these types of clients. We know that by, at this current rate, by fall or by spring, we're going to need some additional. And then where we have shifted, and this has been it took a long time to kind of get here, but is we started an internship program, and that internship program has been really great. And not every intern stays on for a job, but they do gain valuable skills, and it's a lot of fun to work with them and watch the young folks grow and can see their eyes opened about all the different possibilities. But then sometimes the opportunity is right, and you add them to the team, and so it starts to what's nice about that is they're already a little bit familiar with kind of how you do things, and so when you get to that point where you can have those internships, it really changes the hiring cycle.
Yeah, that's great. I think a great opportunity to be able to try out talent
Yep.
before you commit. And it also gives them some real world experience. I love that. So random, and I rarely, plug other businesses, but I'm curious if you've ever heard of Parker Dewey and their micro internship.
I have not. That sounds interesting.
So well, I'll connect you with some info later
Yeah.
then because they do these micro internships where it's a really great opportunity where it's not even a full summer thing. It's here's a very discrete project that I need worked on, and a lot of those things then turn into longer term projects. It's another great way to try talent out.
Sure.
But your internship program just made me think of that. I'm bringing on full time people, but as you transition from just a few to growing the team, what are some challenges that you encountered in that journey?
The processes that you developed, two things happen. One is communication changes, and the processes that you developed when the team was smaller don't always scale to when the team is larger. And so that's an area that people sometimes forget to look at. And what ends up happening is when you have a process that starts, breaking down, you kind of look everywhere else first until you realize, let's review the process. And sometimes where you keep your process documentation. So, and sometimes you end up having process documentation in more than one location. Or you'll use some process automation software. Well, does your process automation software match your SOP? If and we found a few instances where they were close, but they were slightly mismatched, and it was causing problems. And you don't discover those things um, until you've been running those processes a long time, and then usually it's something changes that forces you to, maybe you had a personnel change, or someone had to take over for a while, and then you really find out. I always kind of use, people go on vacation and someone else does their role for that period of time. Like, it's sort of a test of your process documentation of how well is it written, and how well can someone else pick it up. So you sometimes, when you can do a little test like that, it helps you find the gaps a little bit. But as you get as the further along you go, the more sophisticated, the longer your processes get, the more sophisticated they get, and the easier it is for them to have variance.
Yeah, I can imagine that being challenging. I mean, there's just the knowledge management piece can be so challenging. And as you scale and try to rely on that knowledge management, it's, a really a test of the quality
Yeah,
of
yeah,
of that knowledge. It makes me think of there are times when when I've been running teams where I've had turnover and I knew that we didn't have, that there was too much knowledge in that person's head.
yeah,
But I also realized that I could understand, like, what are the critical things that if they fall down, that things are really going to fall apart, and I would grab those. And sometimes I would kind of let everything else fall, like let the pieces
yeah.
fall, because let's test our systems and see, like, what actually needs to be rebuilt, what isn't working right. And so, yeah, it's an interesting opportunity. It's your when you said, when you've had people go on vacation, that being really a test of
Right.
the documentation. That's what
Yeah.
made me think about it.
One of the things that we did over the years and still do, you're familiar with a wiki like Wikipedia.
Hmm.
We have an enterprise grade wiki that we use internally. And the whole sole purpose, and we've ingrained this into our culture, is to capture that tacit knowledge that people are keeping in their head. And, I'll
Hmm.
tell engineers or even administrative people, like, you don't have your documentation doesn't have to be perfect. Just write down the 10 relevant bullet points that we need to know. We can figure out the mechanics of how to push the buttons, but we need to know what those decision points were that were critical in what you decided in setting said thing up, right? And that has
Hmm.
really helped over the years. uh, uh, we've been able to keep that tacit knowledge in house, as a result of having that wiki database in house.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm curious if you've looked at, just a side tangent that's making me think of this is, I'm curious if you're using AI to pull any of that together, because I know now, like, you can take these big bunches of disparate information and kind of essentially throw them in a drive, hook up one of
Yep.
the generative AI tools, and you now have your knowledge base,
Yep.
right? I'm curious if you're doing anything with that.
Yeah. The Microsoft's Copilot has, I call them connectors. Microsoft calls them applications. They're fundamentally a connector to another application. And so in our case, we use a Confluence wiki by Atlassian. And so Atlassian's a pretty
Mhm.
well known company out there. And so we can now open a Copilot instance that's to our Atlassian instance, and then query all the knowledge base that's in there, because we've been entering data into that wiki since we first started using it in 2004. So that's a long time to put data into a system. And so one can imagine that after a while it can get hard to find things. And that's where AI can help, bring that together. Um, and I've seen a lot of people, because over the years you people have a tendency to keep everything because they don't know if they're going to need it at some point in the future. We see this with clients all the time, where they're afraid to get rid of their data. And this is sort of becoming a little bit of an issue for AI, because if you have 12 versions of your company handbook, which one's the authoritative? AI is going to read them
Mhm.
all. So there's a situation going on here where us and everyone, because Microsoft's Copilot is contextually aware of your entire environment. So it's aware of your SharePoint, it's aware of your email, it's aware of all these things. So kind of pairing your data to authoritative data is something that we need to start thinking about.
Yeah. That's interesting. I haven't thought about that, but it's like, managing a database, right?
Yes.
Garbage in, garbage
Yep.
out. You've got to keep your data clean.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to go back to talking about your team a little bit. I'm curious, as you've continued to grow, another thing that founders often find challenging is delegating to others on the team as the team grows. And you said kind of one of your pain points, or what you decided to move forward with, is when it's too painful, or when you've got too much work and
Right.
it's time to just start adding people. So tell me a little bit about that balance of delegation and when you know it's right to start delegating work.
Yeah, I think I there's a little thing I kind of would say to myself in my head, which was it if it can I delegate this and will it, and if let's say they really just royally fail at it, is it going to take me down? If the answer is no, and it's just causing a little bit of pain, then delegate it, right? If it's something that's
Hmm.
going to take you down, then you need to question, right?
Hmm.
And then maybe you need to delegate that. If you're going to delegate it with a lot of process and clear defined expectations behind it, right? um a lot of the other stuff that we worry about delegating is immaterial. And I think you have to kind of come to terms with yourself that no one is ever going to do it exactly the way you do it. But if you can impart on them the principles behind the way and why you do things, they tend to will want to adopt that, you know. Um,
Hmm.
I have this principle of the salt shaker that I tell people, which is when you go at a dine at a high end restaurant, you'll notice that after someone leaves, there's a very specific spot for all of the things on the table. So the salt shaker has a very specific spot, and as people are dining and coming and going, you'll see that waiter or waitress, they'll always put that those items back in the very specific spots they go. So I teach that principle to our team, which is if you see something at a client site that seems off, that's outside of our standard way of doing things, that's a salt shaker situation, and you need to move that salt shaker back to that center of the table where it belongs.
Yeah, that's such an interesting analogy. I love it. I haven't heard of a similar analogy before, so I really like that.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear about your vision for the future of the business, and what's the future look like for a couple of gurus.
Yeah, we continue to plan and grow. We uh, uh, currently with um, uh, while we're Minnesota based, we've started to expand beyond this geographic region, especially with computing. A lot of computing being in the cloud these days. It doesn't really matter where clients are located. So our team is now distributed in several states as a result. And so that's really opened up new opportunities that perhaps in the past, we wouldn't have considered. And so now we're serving customers and clients across the United States. So it's kind of a fun time. I think we'll continue to. I think we're at the beginning of this whole AI, you know, revolution, evolution. And a lot of people are still getting their head around it. A lot of people are figuring out what they do, and that for me is the exciting part of technology, is discovering its potential and what it can do for you and how it can make life better. You know it it we Society has always appreciated the advancement in technology. It has allowed us to do things that we couldn't otherwise fathom before. You just look at transportation, right? How long it took, for aviation industry when the airplane first came about to jets, right? That time span was, whatever, a little less than 100 years, but it made a great impact on society. And I think we're going to see the same thing with AI. And so I think part of my excitement is discovering and figuring out what's our role going to be in that in that as it unrolls, and how can we get people thinking differently about, not being afraid of it, right? But taking advantage of it and using it strategically, and using it to make life better.
Yeah, that's so great. And how big's your team today, and how big is it going to get?
Yeah. So today we're right around 20 people. And um, we will, which we've approximately stayed true to the one person per year ratio. That'll probably accelerate actually as we move forward. Um,
Mhm.
uh, I would expect that rate to start to double. You do when you get to a certain point. There's a lot of things that are hard to survive for small businesses, right? One, when in the beginning you're trying to figure it out, right? Um, then when people hit their first recession, right? My first recession was the 2008 recession. There's business schools don't go over how to survive recessions, right? That's not a class. You learn that by trial and fire, right? You learn that by going through it. So uh, 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 you start to that knowledge starts to build upon itself, right? And so it's interesting to see companies at different stages because they're at the beginning you're trying to figure out, well, how should we do payroll? Well, you know now we're now then we hit the how do we do payroll in multiple states with multiple laws and multiple HR things to figure out, right? Like that's a different, so going back to doing payroll at a single state would be nothing, right? uh so as you start to go, you are learning different things, and um uh you are able to accelerate your growth because you're not going back from the beginning again.
Yeah, I would imagine there's a lot of lessons learned in there, and you can just kind of continue to multiply your growth. Well, Keith,
And the other thing is you're not afraid to learn from someone else.
yeah. Well, and when do you make that pivot that you're not afraid to learn from someone else?
I see a lot of people, it's usually when they've tried everything that they can think of that works, and they just run, they sometimes you get too laser focused in your own wheelhouse, or in your own business, and you don't see what's obviously in front of you. I had a friend once who ran a similar company up in Canada. Um, he's since retired, but he was losing this major client, and that's one of the things that a lot of people will experience, either a loss of a major client or a loss of a key person, and those are things you don't normally plan for. And he realized that he had too much staff for the managed services side of his company. And on the same note, about 10 minutes earlier, he was talking about, he's got all these projects and he didn't know how he's going to get these projects done. And I said to him, wait a minute. He was at a point where he was thinking about letting staff go, but yet he had this other side of his business that he didn't have enough staff. I said, have you considered moving some people over from side A to side B? And it was such an obvious, simple, answer to the problem to someone on the outside, but he was so close to it, he couldn't see it. And and I knew he just needed more time to backfill, the revenue loss. And he went ahead and implemented that strategy, and over a couple of quarters got the projects done and recovered the lost revenue over a couple of quarters. So uh sometimes I think if you're too close to it, that's a great time to bring somebody else in. Peer groups are great for that. And whether they're an industry peer group or a local owners peer group, there's a lot of people have come before you. After a while, you start to realize that it doesn't matter what business you're in. There's a certain set of fundamentals that are universal, and dealing with people is one of those things. And those are things that other people can speak into those problems, and you can really learn from what how did they handle a situation, you know, and then you take that knowledge and you bring it in house and, you know, figure out how you need to attack the problem, you know.
Yeah, thank you for that. Community is so important, I think, in learning and growing and kind of seeing how other people do things.
Yeah.
Um, well, Keith, thank you so much for joining me on Scale Like a CEO. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, feel free to send me an email directly, Keith at a couple of gurus.com. Happy to chat. I always love talking business with people, even if you're in my same industry. You know, there's plenty of work to go around for all of us. Um, uh, let's move forward together.
Great. Thank you so much, Keith.
Thanks, Justin.